Today, honesty is such a superpower. And I mean that as cliche as it might sound, I really, really mean that. Simply because a lot of brands, everyone is trying to get attention. Attention is currency. Thanks, Gary Vee. But it is absolutely true. And everyone's shouting about something because we're all trying to get the attention of our audiences.
There goes a sight from my soul.
Welcome to the Digital Marketing Wingman podcast, the podcast where we bring you helpful tips and advice on websites, Google, and social media.
Now there goes a sight from my soul.
Welcome everybody to the Digital Marketing Wingman podcast about all things Google, social media, and just business and life. I'm joined today by our own Pixel's own digital content specialist, Caden Green. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Nice to have you on. You actually just ticked over 1 year at Pixels.
Yeah,
Very
happy to.
Seems like yesterday.
Yeah.
But for everybody else listening, your background has always been agency. You worked at world-renowned agency DDB, had access to some pretty big global brands working there, right?
Yeah. I ran as a CD, I ran Honda, Skittles. We did a really cool Nike campaign, BM as well. So I worked with some heavy hitters.
So we're quite lucky to have you here, really, and working with Pixel clients. You're obviously passionate about branding, and you just recently held a masterclass as part of the Geelong Small Business Festival, and the feedback was overwhelmingly that your passion was there. So tell us a little bit about that masterclass and what you were talking about.
I think, as you know, Pixel exists to grow businesses smarter, so it made sense that we would be part of that. And it was an amazing day. It was an amazing event. It was really cool to see the turnout, for starters. But I think the most rewarding part of it was to hear some feedback where, a couple of business owners had really implemented some of the stuff that we talked about, and they were seeing results. It's so easy to talk about stuff, and it's easy to put stuff up on slides to impress people. But we wanted to make it really practical, where people could quite literally write the first post, having created their new brand story in the masterclass itself. And we got some feedback from people who had implemented literally some of the stuff we talked about, and we're already seeing, some response. And that's really cool, because then you're not just talking, you're really helping people achieve goals, which is cool.
Theory is one thing, right? Preaching about theory, but actually seeing it work is pretty rewarding.
Yeah, and I think then you can say, you're good at what you do. It's easy to say you're good at what you do. To actually put it into practice and people get to use some of that knowledge and it works is a very different story. So to me, that was the biggest success.
And so branding is a service that Pixel has evolved to offer. We obviously come from our web development, and then that evolved into digital marketing, and a natural evolution of that is that we now offer branding as a service. And a lot of clients will come to us for a brand, or maybe they've gotten a brand and they want to renew it, refresh it, and they want a new logo. But that's not necessarily it, is it? That's not where it starts and finishes.
It's not at all. And one of the first things that we say is that there's so much more to a brand identity, to a brand, than the logo and the color palette. In fact, we put out a blog, well, putting out a blog in the next little while about exactly that, just because we see it coming up so often. Brands arrive and, and they're correct in going, we need a refresh. Absolutely. You need to look the part, but there's more to it. And I think that's where we really steer brands, is to go, there's such a focus on the what. That's what it looks like, and this is what we sell, but why? And the reason why is so important is because the why is the brand story. The brand story kind of pushes everything else out. Your logo, is just kind of an icon. The meaning behind that logo, for example, the Nike swoosh. If we look at that swoosh, it's way more than a tick to us. And the reason for that is the meaning. The meaning that Nike have built over years in our minds is really what makes that tick stand out, memorable, recognizable. And so really what we guide clients to do is to go, yes, let's refresh it and make it look modern and beautiful. But at the same time, let's be building meaning into it to allow people to connect with it so that it means something to them more than just what they're looking at.
Mm. And it's hard to fake that kind of meaning, isn't it? You can't just fabricate something that's not truly part of the fabric of your business or organization. How do we find that true meaning? I think that's a challenge for a lot of people when they start to think, well, I don't have this amazingly righteous purpose in life. They haven't worked out their purpose in life. They might not know themselves for their own identity, let alone their business's identity at their purpose. How do people start digging for that why?
It is tough. And I think it's tough for a reason, because if you can crack it, that's when your brand will truly stand out. And you can, if you think of the bigger leading brands, and not even the bigger brands, but the more meaningful brands, if you think about in your world, what are the smaller, more meaningful brands? The reason why they are meaningful to you is because they've been able to find a truth. And that really is the word. And that's what we guide our clients to do. And what we spoke about at the masterclass was, I hadn't often, in fact, I'd never got the opportunity to put an onion up in a presentation. And I did for a very good reason, because when you're creating your brand story, when you're getting to your brand essence, what you're not doing is creating anything new. You're peeling back layers, hence the onion, to find the truth, to find, what's real. And so if you ever step back, and for any business who's creating their brand story right now, or looking at, is this our brand story that we should take into the future, if it doesn't feel authentic, if it doesn't feel absolutely true to who you are, your why, then keep peeling back the layers to get to that why. We did a little engagement session in the masterclass, and for anyone listening that is at that space of creating their brand identity, or their brand story rather, it's a great little exercise. Is just ask yourself why 8 times. So 5, 6, 7, 8 times. But what I mean is, what are you? A flower shop, for example. Why? Well, we're a flower shop because we want to offer people flowers. Why? And as you start questioning why, you get closer and closer to the truth. And it's that truth. And once you found that truth, that really informs everything. What I mean is, when you look at that final logo for a flower shop, for example, it's without that brand story, it's just a logo for a flower shop that probably has flowers or something ornate like that. But if you've really stressed it and you've gone, why do we exist to sell flowers in the first place? Well, after the 6th, 7th, 8th time of asking why, we've gone, we just want to bring joy to people. And we end up with a line like, and it was the example we used in the masterclass was grab a bunch of joy. Now, all of a sudden, that grab a bunch of joy and the meaning and the emotion behind it makes that logo so much more meaningful to me. And so that exercise is absolutely such a crucial one.
Certainly makes the designer's job a lot easier too, and they get to do something with purpose as well. So how can businesses, I guess, work on ways of being authentic and really connecting with their target audience?
Today, honesty is such a superpower. And I mean that, as cliche as it might sound, I really, really mean that. Simply because a lot of brands, everyone is trying to get attention. Attention is currency. Thanks, Gary Vee. But it is absolutely true. And everyone's shouting about something because we're all trying to get the attention of our audiences. Now, authenticity really is a superpower, simply because where so many brands are going out there and trying to go, we're this, we're that, we're meaningful to you. And they aren't really that thing. They fizzle out over a little while because you can only put that on for X amount of years. Sure, there'll be the hype and you'll launch with that and people will connect with that. But the cracks will start to show in the communication. And over a few years, people start going, just like you would with a relationship, you're not who you said you were. I'm walking away.
Yeah.
And so that authenticity really becomes such a superpower. Because to find that truth and to just build your business in every way, in the branding and how you look and how you sound and how you communicate around that truth, all of a sudden you're just in the most freeing space, because all you have to do is be yourself. All you have to be yourself in what you look like. So what does our logo look like? In the way we communicate. When you pick up the phone or email us, are we responding in a way that honors that truth? So authenticity really becomes the superpower in our communication, in our marketing, in our sales, in our entire CX, our customer experience, that honesty of just going, let's just be ourselves. Let's just sit back and be true to who we are in terms of this business and what it offers. And you find yourself in this most beautiful space where there's an endless supply of what you can talk about, because there's such great depth to who we are, why we exist, why, what problem are we trying to help the audience overcome. Those problems evolve, the world evolves. And as it does, so, who we are and the space that we occupy within it just gives us more to speak about and more hearts to, to connect with as you go.
I think Nike and Red Bull they're the classic sort of brands that I think of that do a great job of really communicating their purpose. They don't sell their products. You never see anything about a drink on the Red Bull social media pages. It's all about extreme sport and, living life to the fullest kind of thing. I don't know their exact catchphrases, but
well, Red Bull gives you wings.
Red Bull gives you wings. Exactly, that's the one.
Which has got nothing to do with.
Yeah, but everything is about their brand. Everything is about their purpose. Nike is very similar. You talked about Nike in the workshop, and they have they're able to break down their story a little bit too, depending on the audience. You
100%.
had a couple of examples of that. What were some of those examples? You had like to a fashion audience and to an athlete audience, and it was quite same story, but tailored and authentic and true. So yeah, very good at connecting.
We were talking about hyper-personalization. And I think that's, as I was talking about, ongoingly, you've got so much to speak about when you find that truth. These guys have worked out, hang on a second, you can't speak to everyone in the same way. You need to be meaningful to different segments of people. And so where Nike exists, I think off the top of my head, we're a sports brand that exists to empower athletes. I'm paraphrasing. But then they went, to empower athletes and, for example, young hip people walking the streets who want to wear our stuff as, as streetwear. There's also your 40-something mom who's going out for coffee. There's also your 70-year-old dude who still wants to kind of feel the part. And so what Nike have done so smart is they've applied that brand story in a hyper-personalized way and made themselves meaningful to each market. It's kind of quite a bit further down the line, but it's definitely a milestone that brands should aim for.
So if a brand, say if you're a business out there, you have a logo, but you've never really worked on your brand beyond the logo. We've already sort of just identified that's not it. That's not a brand. That's what we would call it identity, but I guess businesses would call it a logo. What are some of the other components that someone might need to truly round out their brand?
I like to think of a brand as just a container for the meaning, the why, that is your business. So if that's what it looks like, then who is it? Who is that person? If we're going to personify things behind it. And if that's the case, then there's a bunch of things that are important. If that's what it looks like, what does it sound like? And that, introduces the whole conversation about our tone of voice. How do we communicate using that tone of voice? To peel back even, a layer before that, when you're having a conversation about your why, purpose, pops up. And so, our purpose is to do X. Well, if that's your purpose, then this is where you should be, communicating. You should be communicating to these people. You should be communicating in this way. These kinds of things will be important to you. These kinds of things won't. That truth really informs so much. So it informs the purpose, which then informs, to answer your question, your tone of voice. Where you should be playing, where you should be posting, how you should be posting, the format that you're posting on. Is it a podcast? Is that the right way to get that brand story through? Or should we relook our content completely and stick to blogs because, we're solving way more of the problem by offering, just cold, hard content that people need. So, that truth and stepping back really informs, and to answer your question, all of the other things that are important. The logo is just one component. Our brand strategy, we can have the whole conversation about, in strategic marketing, where that brand story is going to come to life. in an entire CRM strategy, and how we're pushing people around a flywheel to become repeat customers, because we're being strategic about telling that story in interesting ways. I think is to go even deeper than that. Once we've worked out what it looks like, the logo, how we're speaking, where we're speaking, we then go, well, hang on a second. There's where most people would refer to the funnel. Because we're a HubSpot affiliate, would speak to the flywheel, which for us is way smarter and simpler and more effective in terms of going. And at that point you would go, well, where is this potential buyer in terms of that funnel or the flywheel, and you hyper personalize the communication even further. So that logo is really just it's not a small component. I think the thing with logos is they become so meaningful, especially to business owners, because that's what you've got in front of you. That's what you've got on that letterhead. But it's really important to remember that is just such a small part, or a part of many other things that need to be firing at the same time for you to be effective in terms of marketing.
So there's a lot to that. Like it can sound simple, but also quite daunting for a business owner who maybe doesn't have an agency or a branding agency or specialist, on their team. Where can you start? Where can you start if someone's thinking about developing a brand strategy?
Don't forget about the logo. That's important. We will do the logo at the same time, but because that's waiting for the meaning to be put behind it. So while we do that, one of the first things to do, I think one of the most effective things to do, is start with your brand archetype. In terms of your brand story, it's a superpower. Like it just forgoes so much research, so much thinking. And for anyone who doesn't know what that is, some very clever people put a bunch of brand archetypes or sets of characteristics together that really personalize a brand. So what I'm able to do, and Pixel's got an amazing one on our website, is a brand assessment. What I'm able to do is answer a bunch of questions about the characteristics of my business, and it will spit out a first and a secondary brand archetype. What that'll allow me is to start personifying my brand in human terms. And the reason why that's important is because where a bunch of people are engaging on social media, for example, and a business arrives and goes, "Hi, everyone," and everyone shuts down because we don't want a business to be talking to us. A brand archetype gives a brand a bunch of human characteristics that they're able to then take and implement into the way they communicate. If you think about Nike, they don't feel like a business. They feel like that person that who's a person who has human characteristics and is cool and pioneering and all of those things, and they communicate accordingly. And so by taking that assessment and finding out exactly what your brand archetype is, you're immediately allowing or enabling yourself to start speaking to your audience as a person. And once you can start speaking to them as a person, you can start creating a connection. And as we know, that's solid gold. Whereas no one's making a personal connection with a business. So the brand archetype for me is the first step.
So that branding assessment is on the Pixel website. You'll find that under the services menu. Just to give people an idea of some of the archetypes, there are the sage, which is all about knowledge, wisdom, being analytical and smart, which is why it's the pixeled archetype. The rebel, which is about liberation and freedom. The hero, which Nike would relate to, which is all about being courageous and determined and self-sacrificing. There's the lover, the jester, the caregiver, and a few more. So it's a great starting point, I think, for any business to really start to hone in on their brand. And you can grow it and modify it and customize it for your own. But great starting points. And I think it's psychologically based, really. It's really well rounded. It covers just about every personality type. So when a business is cruising along, they've had their logo, what triggers should they be looking for when they realize that they need to change something? Their brand is starting to get tired, or it's no longer the right audience. What can businesses do?
I think I would start by going, what's showing us that we're either slowing down or that something's not working? For example, if we're looking at the customer experience, are we getting them to a certain point and then they're falling off? Because that to me immediately indicates, okay, this is, this is what we should do. In the context of branding, what you'll often find with outdated branding is you're not getting people very far into the desired CX, simply because you don't.
CX for everyone at home, because CX is customer experience.
Indeed, sorry, I should have said that. If you don't look the part, immediately people, are starting to turn off. And so, without a brand story and with a very weak aesthetic, you're not very likely to get people to the site. And if you do get people to the site, immediately they're going to start falling off, because there's nothing there to connect, and there's nothing there that really looks interesting.
And it's funny, that has a knock-on effect in a more technical sense, because search engine optimization is largely based on how users interact with your website. And it's really based on that first impression. So if users are coming to your website and then leaving immediately, Google has all this data. They know that people are not engaging on your website. And that's purely a branding thing, right? So they're basing that experience off of the very first few seconds, which is brand. It either looks the part and it aligns with what the user is looking for, or it doesn't. So it gets quite technical branding. It does have a technical SEO effect down the line.
I think it's like looking across, at someone. If you're looking for a partner, it's the same as sitting down for a meal. You look at the aesthetic first. We just do. That's how we are. We look for the aesthetic first, and then we go look for the meaning, look for the connection. You're attracted to someone, you walk up to them, you have a conversation with them, and then suddenly meaning, and then click, we've got it all. It's exactly the same with, a dish going down in front of you where you eat with your eyes, or when you jump onto that website. And in the first, I think it's like not even a second, or a second and a bit, where you have that long to connect with someone and make them go, you need to engage with the site and have a look. Interestingly, and I'm doing one of the HubSpot courses at the moment about all of this. And interestingly, one of the quotes that came out that really stuck with me was, people don't like completely new. And it was really challenging for me as the creative who wants to start from scratch and pioneer and do all new stuff. It was very interesting to see that this quote, and it was a really informed stat, that spoke about the fact that people don't like completely new. They like what they know with a slight change. And so to anyone listening to this who's there, just change it. Virgil Abloh famously said, I think change it 3 or 9%, and you've got something unique. So that was definitely something that stuck with me. It was you're not looking, if you're in a space right now where you're going, we need to overhaul our site, our logo, our look, our identity, you're not looking to completely refresh. You're not looking to start from scratch. Probably about a 70%, 80% retention, and then just change, factors to bring it back to life is where you want to be.
Do you think brands can go too far with the storytelling, and you become so obsessed with storytelling, people don't actually know what you do anymore? Do you think it can go too far? And when can you bring in the sale, the hook, or as Gary Vee would say, the right hook? Where is the point where you switch from this is my purpose, this is our story, to, by the way, we sell that?
Yeah, it's such a good question. As soon as you asked me the question, immediately the brand Liquid Death came to mind.
Liquid Death? I don't know that one.
International brand. They sell water.
Okay.
Amazing creative. And
water called Liquid Death?
Canned water. And you're not going to see much of the product in any of their stuff. They are just edgy, just wild, crazy stuff that we all loved. And it's, as the creative, you go, oh, they're just pioneering and it's new and it's interesting. But I've got to say, at one point in the last kind of few years, I stopped and I went, they're loving their Kool-Aid a little bit too much. I know this is going to be so contentious, because all the, any creative listening is going to be going, oh, but they're new and they pioneer and they, I think at some point it's got to resolve in, hey, we're also selling a thing. I think the way that you do that is strategic, and that's why we always it's not brand storytelling, it's strategic brand storytelling. It's there for a reason, and a large portion of what we spoke about at the masterclass was we're not here to. This is not all just feelings and stories. We're here for business to sell some stuff. What we've learned is through psychology is that information sticks around in your head, in your audience's head, longer when you tell it through a story. What you're telling them is your why, is your reason to believe, so that you can connect with them. But what we found, and what all the best brands in the world are doing, is they're getting people to connect with them and going, this is who we are, that's who you are. Look, there's a connection. We can be this in the same kind of group. And then, the next part of that conversation is, you have this issue, you have this goal, you have this whatever it might be. We have a product or a service that can help do that. What's fantastic about approaching it in this way through a brand story is that it becomes the cognitive next step in the conversation. So it becomes a natural next step. Whereas if you go at it with, hey, buy this, it's a sell, and I back off. In the same breath, though, and I do think a brand like Liquid Death don't ever get to that sales point, really. It becomes quite self-effacing. And to me, I think as such an advocate for creative effectiveness, I do think at some point, if approached in the right way, that sale, because you've gone at it, through a brand story conversation, does need to be there, does need to be a natural next step. I think the other fact is that when you've worked out exactly what your brand exists to do, the problem it exists to solve, then the sell isn't as icky, because you're not trying to flog the thing. You've understood and taken the time to understand that here is someone who has a problem. I have a product or service that can solve that problem. It becomes way more meaningful even in the sale. And and getting to that's why that truth that informs that brand story is so important, because it filters all the way down to that sale, where you can quite confidently in that conversation with that person go, hey, we know that you have this issue. We know that you have this goal of beating your best. We have a pair of Nike shoes that can help you do that. We've tried them, we've tested them, we've X and Y. Here's all the content to prove that. And it's not gross anymore, because it's authentically solving a problem.
I'm all about removing the ick from sales.
100%.
All about it. All right. Well, a couple of last questions. I'm going to put you on the spot. These were not planned. What is your favorite brand out there, and why? What are they doing? It's so good.
Oh, there's so many. I've got to say Carhartt, for a very interesting reason, simply because they are so agile. Carhartt.
Quick intro of what Carhartt do.
Carhartt
they're not about cars and their engines.
or hearts.
No.
Carhartt is an American. I'd love to actually. Let's do Carhartt, and I'd love to do a local one as well. Carhartt is an American apparel brand, and they started out for work gear for farmers. A couple of years in, some rappers started wearing it. I don't know why, but some rappers in New York, I think New York, started wearing it. And all of a sudden, Carhartt became massive in the streetwear scene. Now, here's a brand that has a fundamental decision to make: is do they continue trying, and ignoring their success in one area and continue to push down workwear for farmers? And they didn't. They were agile enough to go, it didn't work out how we expected, but because we're customer centric, we're realizing we're solving a problem to a different consumer, but that's equally valuable. And so they allowed themselves to be successful and to acknowledge and build into and market and communicate to a completely unexpected audience, and have retained that since. And what's interesting is, I think it's largely because of how agile and kind of just open to it they were, they've retained both markets. So it's unheard of to have a single brand that is absolutely street cred worthy, that also fits out farmers, and both consumer groups are fine with it. Like that to me is is solid gold in terms of a brand story showing up and just being so authentically themselves that they're cool to two completely opposing markets at the same time who are absolutely fine with it. I will say more locally there. I think it's a beer brand. I think they're called Goat.
Yes. Not Mountain Goat.
Is it Mountain Goat?
Yeah,
the
there's a
beer.
Mountain Goat.
Oh
Yeah.
man, I drive past these posters. I don't see them anywhere else except in poster form. It's a single the most recent stuff that's out is for their latest ginger beer.
Oh, yeah.
And all it is a woman, and there's a woman and a couple of guys, but in each case, someone is licking a ginger goat. It's silly, it's fun. My kid laughed at it, I laughed at it. It tells such an amazing story. It's such a great representation of their tone in a single frame. And I've seen a bunch subsequent. The tone is just this irreverent, crazy, standout stuff. And I think why I love it as well is there's value to engaging with their stuff. There's a million different things to look at on those walls. When you look at those posters, there's a great laugh. There's a great little do you see what they did? And so they've been smart enough to go, it's not just funny for the sake of funny. It's funny, clever. There's a little bit of payoff. So I think those guys are doing really well.
Yeah, nice. Well, Conan, I think that will do. We've gone over time. Thank you so much for your time today. And if anybody wants to check out that branding assessment, find that on our website. And you can obviously reach out to Conan via our socials.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I want to just mention as well on the inside section of the Pixeled website, we are writing and putting up a bunch of stuff around this. I haven't seen an insight page that's just as full of relevant, practical kind of info. So that's definitely an amazing little resource for anyone who's thinking or operating in this space for their business. Thank you so much for having me.
Nice one. Thanks, Conan.